Hi, welcome to PK YouTube channel. This is second part of Origin of Human Beings. We saw in part 1 entire Earth getting covered with red rusty ocean, and aerobic eukaryotes means multicellular microbes breathing oxygen only existing. Cyanobacteria covered the entire ocean like green moss. It is from that cyanobacteria all greeneries of our nature evolved. And all animals, including us humans, are evolved from the aerobic microorganism that lived beneath the green sheet of cyanobacteria. As said in Origin of Humans Part 1, let's start from Origin of Sex. Microbes that lived in early Earth made new generations through cell division. But sometimes, before completely getting divided, for reasons like sudden movement in seawater, they might get cut into 2 pieces. And these pieces might still keep being alive and float in seawater. And sometimes, one such piece purely accidentally collide with another microbe which has similarity in body composition. When such pure coincidental accidents happen, body fluid from one living thing's body passes through the other living thing through their delicate cell membrane. A genetic substance called F-plasmid present in the body fluid will also enter the other microbe's body. And there, F-plasmid mixes with the DNA in nucleus. After this mixing of DNA, when cell multiplication happens, the next generation of this microbe will be having a hybrid DNA, a combination of both DNA of the microbes who accidentally collided to each other. Such microbes having delicate, easy breakable cell membrane started the early form of sexual reproduction by transmission of body fluid from one living thing to the other. That was the time Earth was cooling down because entire Earth was covered by oxygen, and water from ocean started flowing downwards and reached the mantle of Earth. Then slowly, land portions started to rise. Calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, sodium, potassium, sulfur, nickel, chloride, lot of metals and minerals like that started to reach ocean from land areas. These metals first got dissolved in seawater and then slowly got absorbed by the microbes living there. With the help of these metals and minerals, DNA started to expand and diversify. Along with their DNA, their body also changed. Through 100,000 years of accumulation of body development, the microscopical body of these living things grew to a size that we can see by our eyes. Those early bacteria now evolved into underwater animal called sponges, first living thing on Earth that can be seen by naked eyes of human beings. The delicate soft cell membrane of early microbes evolved into a more rigid body. The cell membrane that stood between ocean and these microbes started having more layers of protein, one over the other. Thus, through lakhs of years of evolution, skin layers, endoderm and ectoderm formed. In those times, living things eat food by absorbing minerals and metals through the gaps in their cell membrane. But in some sponges, through mutation, ectoderm slowly started turning inwards and a hole got formed through which food started going in and waste got out. Thus, our ancestor called SACORYTUS coronarius was formed, a living thing with one organ in its body, a hole. They started moving around ocean by absorbing ocean water and ejecting it forcefully through the hole in their body. Yes, like a jellyfish they moved. As time passed, between ectoderm and endoderm, a new layer of protein formed called mesoderm. And through mutation, another new hole also formed in ectoderm in some animals. And they used this new hole to absorb food, and they excreted waste through the pre-existing hole, and thus formed organisms like KIMBERLLA, the first living thing to have mouth and anus. All the animals that lived in those times had a round body like a potato. And those animals who traveled their journey to be a human being started a new trend through mutation. The most inner layer called endoderm, which was like spherical bladder, through mutation started changing its shape and acquired the shape of a tube, a hollow pipe, which we call digestive tube. Thus the potato-shaped our ancestor elongated to form worm-like animal that we call nematodes, a kind of sea worms. Not only that, first mouth and then digestive tube and then anus and tail. This body structure that nematodes came up with is followed by all living things that came after nematodes, a real trendsetter. Scientists believe those sea worms who lived in those times are not just mere tubes which food goes in and waste goes out. They might have had female and male types and might have had sexual reproduction like the sea worms that live today, like C. elegans. As we saw, the first sexual reproduction of microbes that they did literally by hitting on each other is known as bacterial conjugation. The sexual reproduction in sponges happened in different way. Their male and female partners eject genetic material out of their body, and the genetic material get mixed up there and will turn into a new offspring and live on the surface where the mixing happened. And later jellyfish-like animals that came after sponges also did mixing of genetic materials like sponges outside the body. But after mixing first forms an egg, later larva is hatched and larva develops into next generation jellyfish. From the first microbes to nematodes, scientists got idea how sexual reproduction happened in all those animals, not from fossil remains. All those animals do sexual reproduction nowadays also in the same way. So scientists assumed earlier also they might have done things in the same way. We got clear fossil evidence of sex happening like we do now is from an old world fish called placoderm. That was when jawbone and backbone was getting evolved and sexual organ made of calcium was formed in those placoderms. How these changes happen through evolution. What is evolution? Let's start the story of evolution by telling the story of our eyes. Eyes. It all started from a cell like chlorophyll in plants that absorb photon from sunlight and release energy. The story of eyes begins with such a photoelectric cell like chlorophyll, which either have formed in an organism through mutation or entering to the body from outside, like we saw in previous episode about cyanobacteria and mitochondria. These photoelectric cells absorb photon from sunlight and give away electric charge. These electric charge travel through thread-like protein and reaches another protein called flagella, which vibrates as it receives electric charge, and the organism moves according to the movement of flagella. Such organisms having photoelectric cell and protein that vibrate according to the electric charge is the first animal to have eyes. We all know sunlight travels in straight line, and this flagella, which get activated only when hit by light, makes the organism move in the direction of the source of light Thus, these organisms reach to distant places where there is more sunlight, more food, and more oxygen. These first animals with eyes indeed got sense of direction for its survival, and they developed and diversified immensely. As we said earlier, to change is the nature of nature. These eyes also were no exception. Soon, eyes evolved. Not only those kind of organisms that move towards light, but also those who can detect dangerous light and move away from it also developed. When we say dangerous light, in those times, it is green color light that comes from alpha, beta, gamma radiations. So those animals who was able to move away from green light could live long without getting affected by alpha, beta, gamma radiations. To understand how these developments happen to eyes, we have to understand the electronics in biology. For that, let's first make a robot that moves like the first organism with eyes. What all electronic parts do we need for that? A photoelectric sensor, which produces an electric signal as it detects light, a conductor for the signal to travel, and lastly, a motor which starts to rotate as it gets signal. Did you understand one thing? That this robot is working in binary system. Yes, the 0101 binary system used in digital electronics and computing. We can call the situation when sensor detects any light source and send a signal as 1 and 0 when there is no light and no signal. Motor works only at signal 1, and when it is signal 0, the motor stops rotating. Now, let's make a robot that moves backward when it is green light and move forward for all other lights. For that, we have to upgrade the sensor so that each spectrum of light is identified separately and give a signal for green light and a different signal when it is other non-green lights. Then, we have to fix a microchip which analyzes these signals and make a decision whether to go backward or forward. We humans make microchip by injecting boron and phosphorus to silicon crystals to make PNP and NPN transistors. And these transistors are connected according to the logic gates designed using binary system to get desired result. Such microchips analyze the signals and turn the motor forward or backward according to logic gate design of transistors inside them. Now, let us see how the first organism with eyes evolved into an advanced organism which can decide if to move forward or backward. Let's assume in the 100,000 kilometer long DNA of first-eyed organism, this portion has information of its photoelectric cell, a portion of 4 base pairs made of 8 nucleotides. When succeeding generations are born, purely accidentally, wrong base pairing might happen to any of these 4 pairs, and the photoelectric cell will also have corresponding changes. As time passes by, new nucleotides join, base pairs increases in this portion, resulting in more changes to the photoelectric cell. So when lakhs of years passes, the photoelectric cell changes according to the mutations happening and nucleotides adding up. In all these different organisms that formed from the first one-eyed living thing, purely randomly, one get the ability to go backwards when it is green light. Ability got from random mutations and nucleotide adding up through lack of years. We can say this guy won the jackpot of evolution. But how exactly the first-eyed living thing evolved into the one who got jackpot through lakhs of years of evolution? Let's find out what changes happened in body as it got nucleotide order which won the jackpot of evolution. When the body of first-eyed organism got bigger through evolution, the protein thread, which carries signal from eyes to flagella, didn't increase its length, but they reach from one end to the other by increasing in number. Staying at same length, these threads get arranged one behind the other and connected using a protein called gap junction protein. Such joints, where two protein threads come closer, are called synapse. There are two types of synapse: excitatory synapse and inhibitory synapse. Using these type of synapse, protein thread carry signal from one part of the body to the other. These two type of synapse can be compared to PNP and NPN transistors on what they do to electric charge. One synapse promote electric charge and the next one diminishes electric charge. As evolution happened, a new neuron called intermediate neuron also formed, giving additional connection between the synapse. For each random mutations happening to nucleotides representing these protein threads, different type of connections occurred according to the mutations. In lack of years, how many such mutations happened, that much different kind of protein thread connections happened. In these different type of connections happening, one organism accidentally got the mutation which made the protein thread connection effectively same to the logic gate design, which transistors are arranged inside microchip we saw in that robot, which can move backward to green light. Since the synapse work like transistors, that organism will also move backward like the robot when it is exposed to green light, an ability got from random mutation. If we check the neuro connection of this organism, we understand to make one decision out of two choices, that organism need 6 neuro connections. Let's go back to the sea worms where we started. The sea worms which live now, C. elegans, have 300 neurons in their brain. This is the picture of their brain. You can see the 300 neurons. These C. elegans can take decisions up to the capacity of these 300 neurons. We humans have 86 billion neurons in our brain. Means we can take that much complicated decisions. Okay. So, through lakhs of years of evolution, we saw how brain and eyes developed. From here, the course of evolution was directed by the most abundant metal on earth, calcium. Calcium, as calcium 2+ ions, worked as signal carriers in neurons. Calcium, as calcium chloride, got inside DNA and increased the mutations happening. Calcium continued doing its magic. Some organisms absorb calcium and eject calcium carbonate out through their skin. Such organisms started having hard covering of calcium carbonate on their skin. Those times where most of the organisms wore armor of calcium carbonate is called Cambrian period. The time where living things got diversified the most. From fossil studies of living things of Cambrian age, scientists say Cambrian period was explosion of life and evolution. Calcium during Cambrian period did one more thing. For some organisms, calcium in the form of calcium phosphate got into the body and appeared inside mouth, an old form of our teeth. And after 100,000 of years, a thin cartilage-like bone made of calcium phosphate formed above the digestive tube of that organism, an early form of backbone. Like that, not only those organisms with armor of calcium carbonate, but organisms with teeth and backbone made of calcium phosphate also existed in Cambrian period. Such organisms like Paikia, Aeschyloides lived in Cambrian period are ancestors of human beings. They were small and life was tough. To escape from giant hunters of those times like Anomalocadus, our ancestor had to swim really fast to escape getting caught. So those who had strong muscles to swim and streamlined shape to move fast only could survive. And by the time we reached from Cambrian period to Devonian period, after lakhs of years, our ancestors evolved into fishes like placoderms, which had strong body and jawbone. The fish we saw early, the one which fossil proof we got of sexual reproduction, such fishes lived during these times. But our ancestors were still small, and there were bigger dangerous living things in those times too. To escape from giant hunters, our ancestors migrated to shallow areas of sea. But slowly, in shallow water population of fishes increased and it caused drop in oxygen level. Plants couldn't survive and eventually fishes couldn't too. They were afraid to go back to deep ocean because of giant hunters, but they couldn't continue anymore in shallow waters. Never ever in the history of Earth any living thing have faced adaptive pressure of evolution this much. Fishes have an air-filled bladder inside their body called swim bladder, which keep their balance while swimming. Through mutations, blood vessels started forming in swim bladder and oxygen got absorbed to blood in those blood vessels from the air in swim bladder. The swim bladder, which helped the fishes to float in water, became the first form of lungs for those who got mutation. Those fishes could take oxygen from air above the surface of water and could survive. Slowly, they started coming out of water to land. Fishes like Tiktaalik came into existence, and they were one of the first fish ever to come out of water after plants and insect. What happened in land? We can see that in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Stay home, stay safe.